This girl, Ningan, is constantly bullied by her cruel mother-in-law, who despises her for being poor and for failing to produce a child. She forces Ningan to kneel and serve her food. One day, Ningan accidentally spills hot soup on herself, burning her skin, yet her mother-in-law shows no mercy or sympathy. Ningan's suffering deepens when she discovers her husband kissing her best friend, Yutong, in their bedroom. When Ningan confronts them and strikes her husband in anger, he becomes violent, grabbing her by the hair, while Yutong joins in and humiliates her further. At the same time, elsewhere, two men are sent to kill a woman named Jean, who looks exactly like Ningan. Unaware of her deadly abilities, they attack her, but Jean effortlessly dodges their blows and counterattacks. She grabs a knife, charges at them, and brutally cuts them down, leaving them to die. When Jean returns home, her gangster father's men inform her that he is being investigated by a cop. Suddenly, she hears a gunshot and rushes outside, only to find her father dead, with a man named Yan sitting beside him. Before Jean can react, Yan escapes. Later that night, a furious Ningan storms out of her house in a car. At the same time, Jean is also driving out, searching for Yan. Fate intervenes when their cars collide in a violent crash. The next morning, Jean wakes up surrounded by strangers who call her by an unfamiliar name, Ningan. When the mother-in-law tries to bully and hit her, Jean grabs her hand, throws her away, and warns her never to touch her again. As the father-in-law begins to suspect something is wrong, a doctor arrives and claims that Ningan has lost her memory. Back at the house, Jean slowly learns how her so-called in-laws have abused her. She calls the police, and the officer who arrives turns out to be Yan, the same man who killed her father. Jean does not recognize him due to her memory loss, but Yan recognizes her immediately. However, he does not arrest the in-laws as he is their nephew. When Jean later meets Yan alone, she tells him she remembers nothing about her past. Yan is confused by how she still knows about her in-laws' cruelty despite her memory loss. Jean insists that her in-laws are trying to kill her to seize her company shares. When Yan refuses to trust her, she begs him for time to prove the truth. During a family dinner, the in-laws pretend to be kind. The mother-in-law serves Jean her favorite dish, secretly laced with poison. Unlike Ningan, Jean refuses to be submissive and flatly refuses to eat, even when they try to force her. Meanwhile, Yutong plots another scheme. She convinces a servant to sleep with Ningan and secretly record it after drugging her. Yutong later offers Jean a special drink, but Jean senses something is wrong and asks Yutong to fetch her medicine. While Yutong is away, Jean switches their glasses. When Ningan's abusive husband storms in to catch Ningan with the servant, he instead finds Yutong in the compromising situation, turning her own trap against her. The in-laws then try to force the servant to frame Jean, claiming that he slept with Yutong on Jin's orders. However, Jean has already spoken to the servant beforehand. Terrified, he confesses the truth, that Yutong planned everything on her own and ended up falling into her own trap. Yutong refuses to accept the accusation, but when Jean steps forward to confront her, a drug bottle suddenly slips out of Yutong's clothes. With undeniable proof exposed, Jean throws Yutong out of the mansion. Yutong begs for forgiveness, but Jean coldly refuses to show her any mercy. Later, Jean visits the site of the accident, trying to recall what truly happened that night. Two men approach her, but before they can do anything, she instinctively fights them off with brutal efficiency. The incident shocks Jean herself, as she realizes she can fight like a gangster without even thinking. The next morning, Yan comes to visit Jean, still unsure whether she is Jean or Ningan. Wanting confirmation, he looks for the tattoo Jean once had. Suddenly, he grabs her tightly and pulls at her clothes to check her body. There is no tattoo, only a burn mark. The following day, Yan returns to apologize for touching her inappropriately, but Jean refuses to forgive him so easily. Soon after, Jin's evil sister-in-law, Fu, arrives at the mansion, swearing to turn Jin's life into a living hell. Fu's young son deliberately throws his kite onto a tree and asks Jean for help. Unaware of his malice, Jean brings a ladder to retrieve it. Believing Jean to be a bad woman, the boy suddenly pushes the ladder away. Jean nearly falls, but Yan catches her just in time. That same night, while Jean prepares dinner for the family, Fu schemes again. She sends her son under the table to burn Jin's leg. Anticipating this, Jean shields herself with Fu's dress instead. The child ends up setting his own mother's dress on fire. Even then, Fu shamelessly tries to accuse Jean of harming her. Jean finally speaks up, exposing how Fu has been deliberately using her innocent son to hurt her. Soon, the in-laws learn that a lookalike of Ningan exists and that both women were involved in car accidents on the same day. Later, Fu's son approaches Jean with a cake, pretending to apologize. In truth, Fu has planned to trigger Jin's allergic reaction. Unable to refuse, Jean eats the cake and soon appears to suffer from severe allergies. At that moment, Yan arrives and takes Jean away. He already knows she is only pretending, using the act to make Fu believe she is truly Ningguang. Furious, Fu scolds her son for being useless, only to learn from him that he never added the substance she instructed. Jean had merely acted out the reaction. Meanwhile, Jean slowly begins to realize that she is not Ningguang, but someone else entirely. At the same time, the real Ningguang is secretly watching Jean through a hidden camera. Later, the mother-in-law sends a group of men to approach Jean, claiming she is the daughter of their boss. Jean is confused but continues pretending to be Ningguang, suspecting it may be another trap set by her in-laws. The gangsters insist she is Jean and ask her to unlock a device using her fingerprint. When it fails, it is revealed, through the real Ningguang, that the tablets had already been swapped. The gangsters begin harassing Jean, but before they can touch her, Yan arrives and steps in to protect her. He grabs Jean and tries to pull her away, but she insists she still has things to say to them. At that moment, her mother-in-law orders a sniper to kill Jean. Yan shields her, taking the risk himself and saving her life. Back at the mansion, Jean overhears her sister-in-law discussing plans to conduct a DNA test to finally prove that Jean is not Ningguang. Now Jean grows afraid. To survive the coming DNA test, she must somehow obtain Ningguang's blood sample. At the same time, a cop is speaking with Jin's father-in-law when Fu's young son suddenly appears. The cop, already agitated, angrily points his gun at the child. Yan rushes in to stop him, but the boy faints from shock. Jean strikes the cop with a brick and carries the unconscious child into the mansion. Instead of gratitude, the in-laws immediately blame Jean. She ignores their senseless accusations and focuses only on saving the child's life. When her husband tries to stop her, accusing her of harming his nephew, Yan intervenes. Trusting Jean, he orders everyone to leave and gives her space to act. Jean uses a pen to puncture the boy's lung, allowing temporary oxygen flow and keeping him alive. When doctors arrive, they take over and praise Jean for acting quickly and decisively, saving the boy's life. Despite this, Fu's hatred only deepens. She brings the family doctor to the mansion to take Jin's blood sample and finally prove she is not Ningguang. Jean cleverly spills alcohol on herself, claiming the doctor cannot draw blood while she is drunk. The in-laws grow suspicious, sensing that Jean is deliberately delaying the test. Later, while Jean is preparing medicine for the child, Fu secretly cuts Jin's finger with her sharp nails, collects a drop of blood and hands it to the doctor. Jean notices everything and follows the doctor, intending to switch the sample. Suddenly, she is pulled into a car by Yan. Furious, Jean demands to know why he keeps interfering in her affairs. Yan calmly says he is only helping her and tells her not to worry. When the doctor walks past, Yan suddenly kisses Jean to hide her from view. Shocked, Jean bites his lip and storms out of the car. The next morning, the in-laws host a grand party, confident they will finally expose Jean as a fake. When the doctor arrives with the report, everyone is stunned. The blood sample matches Ningguang's DNA. Jean is officially declared the rightful heir to the empire her father left behind. Enraged, the mother-in-law tries to attack Jean, but Jean remains calm and exposes Fu instead, revealing that she stole her mother's expensive jewelry and replaced it with fake pieces. Fu desperately denies it, but suspicion, furious, the mother-in-law throws Fu out of the mansion. That night, Jin's husband tries to force himself on her, but Jean refuses to spend even a minute with him and leaves the room. Outside, she meets Yan and decides to teach her husband a lesson. She deliberately seduces Yan, touching him provocatively. Yan smiles, pulls her close, and kisses her forcefully in front of her husband. Shocked, confused, and humiliated, Jean quickly leaves. Later, her husband storms back to take revenge, but Jean fights him off. The confrontation is interrupted when a servant rushes in with shocking news: Yutong is pregnant. The mother-in-law is delighted, thrilled that her son will finally have a child. She immediately uses this as another excuse to humiliate Jean for being childless. Yutong pretends her feet hurt and asks for hot water, secretly planning to injure Jean. She attempts to throw the boiling water at her, but Yan shields Jean and takes the burn himself. Concerned, Jean forcibly applies ointment to Yan's burned back. Yan realizes that Jean has begun to care for him, though she stubbornly refuses to admit it. From the next day onward, Jean pretends to be friendly toward Yutong, claiming they have been close for years and that she now wants to take care of her and the baby. She stays close to Yutong at all times, forcing her to exercise properly and never letting her out of sight. Later, Yutong deliberately seduces Jin's useless husband right in front of her. Jean shows little emotion, calmly recording everything on her phone. At that moment, the mother-in-law arrives and explodes in anger, scolding both Yutong and her son harshly. Yutong flies into a rage and pushes the mother-in-law down the stairs, then immediately screams that Jean was the one who did it. She convinces the father-in-law that Jean attacked his wife. Already looking for an excuse to drive Jean out, the malicious father-in-law orders the servants to beat her. Once again, Yan arrives in time and shields Jean, refusing to let anyone touch her. Yan then plays a video recording that clearly shows Yutong pushing the mother-in-law. Even with the evidence exposed, Yutong pretends to be innocent and somehow escapes immediate punishment. Later, Jean discovers one of her father-in-law's personal belongings hidden inside Yutong's dress. Before she can react, Yan appears, and the two hurriedly hide inside a cupboard as Yutong and Jin's husband rush into the room. The pair light a powerful drug meant to increase desire and begin kissing each other. The strong scent affects Jean and Yan as well, and overwhelmed by the moment, Yan loses control and kisses Jean. Afterward, Jean tells Yan about her suspicion that Yutong and the father-in-law are having an affair and that the child may actually belong to him. To uncover the truth, Jean secretly installs a camera in the father-in-law's room. Soon after, Jin's useless husband approaches her, offering to take her back. He promises to abandon Yutong and let Jean become the child's mother. When Jean firmly refuses, he turns bitter and claims that even Yan only cares about her because of her company shares. His words shake Jean, leaving her confused. She begins avoiding Yan. When he asks what is wrong, Jean questions whether he would still like her if she were no one at all. Yan remains silent. Meanwhile, Yutong visits the doctor and learns that she will not be able to keep the baby. Desperate, she begins planning something sinister. She later meets Jean alone, pretending she wants to talk. When Jean refuses to react to her provocations, Yutong suddenly throws herself to the ground and starts screaming, accusing Jean of pushing her and causing her to lose the baby. To make the accusation convincing, Yutong injures herself further and demands justice, insisting Jean be punished. Before the mother-in-law can attack Jean, Yan intervenes and brings in the doctor who examined Yutong. The doctor reveals the truth. Yutong was already close to losing the baby and had even purchased abortion pills after learning this. Jean is cleared of all accusations. She demands justice and insists that Yutong be punished. At that moment, Yutong's father arrives. He speaks of his loyalty and hard work for the family and claims that now his daughter has suffered greatly and lost a child in their household. He demands compensation from Jin's husband. Jean finally steps forward and delivers the truth. She reveals that the child actually belonged to the father-in-law. To prove it, she plays a video recording of Yutong sleeping with him. The mother-in-law is shattered by the betrayal. Enraged and humiliated, she lashes out violently at Yutong. Once again, Yutong is thrown out of the house. Later, Jean meets the father-in-law privately and strikes a deal with him. She will help him secure her position as CEO of the company in exchange for keeping his video secret. Terrified that Jean now holds power over him, the father-in-law secretly orders his men to eliminate Jean once and for all. The next morning, when Jean arrives at the company, several armed men block her path. Before they can act, Yan appears and calmly tells Jean to leave the gangsters to him. Jean proceeds to the board meeting and confidently demonstrates her capability to lead the company. When the voting begins, the father-in-law initially wins. Just then, Yan enters as a shareholder and casts his vote in Jin's favor. With his support, Jean wins the vote and becomes the new chairwoman. Later, as Jean walks into the office, senior employees deliberately bully her. Even after she declares herself the new chairwoman, they refuse to stop. One of them intentionally spills water on her, and when her phone rings, it is Yan calling. A mocking colleague snatches the phone and throws it into the water. When the harassment continues, a kind female employee steps in to defend Jean, only to become their next target. Unable to tolerate it any longer, Jean fights back. Yan soon arrives and stands beside her. The bullies finally realize that the woman they humiliated is the new chairwoman. Terrified, they kneel and beg for forgiveness. Jean forces them to reveal who ordered them to target her and learns it was Yutong's father. Meanwhile, Yutong's father discovers that Jean is pretending to be Ningguang after noticing inconsistencies in her signature. When Jean confronts him to demand access to the company's fund locker, he tells her that only Ningguang and her father's iris scan can open it. Jean notices documents on his desk and realizes he already suspects her identity. He takes her to the locker and insists she open it. Jean panics, knowing she will be exposed, but she has no way to retreat. To everyone's shock, the locker opens successfully. Jean is relieved, unaware that the real Ningguang secretly unlocked it remotely using her own iris scan. A few days after becoming CEO, Jean learns the company is drowning in massive debt and on the verge of bankruptcy. Determined to save it, she contacts a powerful investor recommended by her secretary. When she calls him, he asks her to meet privately at his hotel. Suspicious and confused, Jean goes to investigate and ends up in danger when a drunken man harasses her. At the critical moment, the investor appears and rescues her. Jean is stunned to learn that the mysterious investor is actually Yan, who has been secretly helping her all along. With his support, Jean manages to pull the company out of debt. Soon after, fake news spreads online accusing the company of drug smuggling, causing the stock price to crash. Yan reveals that Yutong's father is behind the operation and has been using the company as a front. They go to gather evidence, but Yutong and her father realize they are coming. Desperate, Yutong locks Jean and Yan inside the mansion and sets it on fire to kill them both. As flames spread, Jean and Yan secure the smuggling data onto a drive and search for an escape. Yan gives Jean his face mask, inhaling the smoke himself until he collapses. In panic, Jean removes her mask, holds him tightly, and kisses him. They manage to escape through a window just in time. As Yutong's father tries to flee, he finds Jean and Yan waiting for him inside his own car. The next morning, Jean exposes Yutong's father in front of the company board and fires him on the spot. Unable to bear the humiliation, he pulls out a gun to kill Jean. From behind, Yan strikes him down with an iron rod before he can fire. Later, the furious mother-in-law orders her useless son to approach Jean and somehow deceive her into handing over the company. He visits Jean at her office and pretends to apologize, hoping to regain her trust and seize her shares. Jean sees through his act, refuses to listen, and walks away without looking back. Meanwhile, Yutong and her father plan another way to destroy Jean. The next morning, when Jean arrives at the office, she finds a video of her and Yan playing on every computer screen. She remains calm, immediately realizing it is fake. At that moment, Yutong storms in with her father and a group of reporters, accusing Jean of having an illicit affair and trying to publicly disgrace her. Jean calmly exposes the video as AI-generated, proving it is fabricated. Enraged, Yutong throws hot milk at Jean, but Yan steps in and shields her, taking the burn himself. Seeing Yan hurt because of her deeply upsets Jean. She applies ointment to his burned skin, and in the moment, Yan loses control and pulls her close by the waist. Outside the room, Jin's useless husband witnesses everything. Back home, the husband explodes in anger and accuses Jean of cheating. Jean throws him into the bathtub, pins him down, and forces him to watch old videos of how he abused Ningguang. She humiliates and torments him, making him experience the same suffering Ningguang once endured. Later, Jean encounters a gang member who reveals the truth, that she is not Ningguang, but Jean, the boss's daughter. They show her a video as proof and reveal that Yan was present when her father was killed. Furious, Jean storms into Yan's office, points a gun at him, and demands to know why he killed her father. Yan admits he knew this day would come and explains that he only went to arrest her father, who was a gangster, but someone else killed him. Refusing to believe him, Jean cuts all ties with Yan and leaves to uncover the truth herself. That same day, Yan meets Jin's father-in-law, pretending to strike a deal. Acting on his orders, Yan falsely arrests Jean, humiliates her in front of her father-in-law, and sends her to prison. Inside, other inmates attempt to assault her, but Jean cleverly manipulates them into fighting each other, buying herself time. Soon after, Jin's gang members arrive and rescue her. The next morning, as the father-in-law celebrates Jin's arrest, she suddenly appears. Yan arrives shortly after and arrests the father-in-law for money laundering. Later, Yan apologizes to Jean for his past actions, promising to explain everything when the time is right. But Jean has already regained her memory and is now waiting for the perfect moment to take revenge on him. When Jean returns home, her evil husband and mother-in-law order her to do household chores as punishment for sending the father-in-law to jail. Jean ignores them and forcefully takes control of the house. That night, while walking alone and lost in thoughts of Yan, Jean is suddenly kidnapped by one of her father-in-law's men. Yan receives a call challenging him to rescue her. Before the kidnapper, an evil cop with a personal grudge against Yan, can harm Jean, Yan arrives. The cop scatters broken glass on the ground and threatens Jin's life, forcing Yan to crawl toward them. With no other choice, Yan crawls to save her. Even then, the cop attempts to kill Jean, but backup officers arrive just in time and save her. Suddenly, Jean points a gun at Yan, accusing him once again of murdering her father. Yan insists he is innocent, but Jean no longer believes him. Seeing her hatred, Yan grabs the gun, presses it to his chest, and tells her to shoot. Jean pulls the trigger. Yan collapses and dies in front of her. Jean breaks down in tears, takes a pen drive from him, and returns to her old home. There, she discovers evidence suggesting that her father's real murderer may have been her father-in-law. She returns to her in-law's house, choosing revenge without violence. She exposes her mother-in-law's past crime, reminding the father-in-law that it was his wife who murdered his beloved girlfriend to marry him. Jean plays old video footage as proof. Enraged, the father-in-law throws her out of the mansion. Later, the useless husband kidnaps Jean, planning to keep her captive for life. Calm and calculating, Jean frees herself from the handcuffs and attacks him. She ties him to a bomb and forces him to sign the divorce papers. He refuses at first, insisting he will never divorce her, but soon breaks down in fear. Jean takes his thumbprint and frees herself from the marriage forever. When Yutong later tries to throw acid on Jean, she accidentally spills it on herself, burning her own hands. Jean laughs coldly at her misery and walks away. Finally, Jean visits her father's grave to pay her respects, only to realize that her gang leader is missing. Later, Jean receives a message from her father-in-law, demanding that she come and rescue her gang leader. Realizing it is a trap but having no other choice, Jean goes to the location where the gang leader is being held captive. The moment she arrives, a fierce gunfight breaks out. At the same time, Jan, who is still alive, wakes up in a hospital beside the real Ningon. She had secretly brought him there and saved his life before he could die. As bullets fly around Jean, Jan suddenly arrives with his men and opens fire on the enemies. Seeing him alive, Jean is overwhelmed with relief and happiness and rushes toward him. Meanwhile, as the chaos unfolds, the useless husband tries to escape. At that moment, the real Ningon returns home. Mistaking her for Jean, the husband begs her to run away with him and start a new life. Ningon plays along and seduces him, but when he realizes she is actually Ningon, he slaps her. Ningon calmly picks up a knife and stabs him between the legs, ending his escape forever. Soon after, Jean goes missing. When Jan sets out to search for her, he is falsely arrested and detained. The next morning, Jean wakes up handcuffed inside her father-in-law's house. He prepares to kill her, but before he can act, Jan reveals himself. He had already infiltrated the place disguised as one of the old man's own men. As the father-in-law tries to flee, Jan fires at him, pulls Jean to safety, and frees her from the cuffs. Knowing they may not survive, Jan pulls Jean close and kisses her. Before the old man can strike again, other police officers storm into the mansion. Seizing the moment, Jan takes the old man's gun and shoots him, finally ending his crimes. In the end, the real Ningon is rightfully restored as the CEO of the company. Jean walks away from the shadows of the past and returns to Jan, choosing to live a peaceful and happy married life with him.